Updike's voice is very original. I think it's original because all the images, all the metaphors are weaved into the story in a way that speaks of an original perception of life itself. And by original perception of life, I don't mean original set of opinions about life. I mean a way of seeing things that is somehow not dependent on borrowed ways of seeing. This is the aesthetic part of the novel. Now, if you look at the characters very deeply, you see that all of them have this sort of limitation. So volitionally, willfully, they can only go to a certain extent when it comes to perception. What extent is this? Now, for Rabbit himself, who's the main character, this is quite high. He's a very deep character. So when he perceives, and when he wishes to perceive, and when he recalls his past of having lived a certain life, of having been in a certain depth of experience, we can see that his moral situation currently is in conflict with his aesthetic possibility, with his potential for beauty. And so this conflict is constantly harrowing him to the point where he has to run. And what is important, I think, for the novel's integrity is that the Rabbit cannot quite shake off this moral sense of what is beautiful. So what that means is that he is constantly having to think of what is right because it is beautiful versus what is beautiful because it is right. Now, since this video is not an exposition of the novel, just a series of recommendations, I'm not going to go into depth about the thematic control, about the structure, and about the sentence structures, about the minutiae of style. I'm not going to do that. However, I very strongly recommend this book. I think Updike's in the highest company when it comes to a writer, if not for anything else, just for his originality. If you're a writer who is struggling to come up with new ways of looking at the same building, new ways of looking at the same sky, then Updike will sort of jolt you out of your resigned state. So yeah, it's worth reading. Well, the second book I want to talk about in this fiction setting, although it's poetry, it's fictional poetry, is Childe Harold's Pilgrimage by Byron, Lord Byron. I had not read much of Byron except for a few portions here and there of his collections. But what struck me about Childe Harold's Pilgrimage and about Byron's way of writing poetry was just how intensely passionate it is. I have not seen much of this kind of elevated passion in Western poetry, especially in that age. If you look at Shakespeare's poetry of an earlier age, of course, his characters are very passionate, but if you look at his sonnets, then the voice sort of comes down in pitch. It becomes much more somber, much more reflective. And I noticed this very much with Wordsworth. Wordsworth never lets himself get carried away. Even in his most intensest, most intimate moment, you don't see intensity. You don't see us straying away from that prudence in Wordsworth, that is. But Byron, who is just as important as Wordsworth in this romantic setting, has this just plunging at life kind of sense. Now, in Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, there is this constant refrain, and when I reflected on the poems and scribbled something, I noticed that I kept coming back to this refrain, which is that there is this sense of having been disappointed earlier in life, some kind of philosophical or even romantic, whatever, a disillusionment. And whenever a child is in, let's say he's in Greece, he's in Italy, he's in Turkey, wherever he is, and then his passion sort of takes this route of being elevated, singing praises, and then there's a point where this memory of having been disappointed comes back, and that is the refrain, and that again, brings back the poem to a integral whole. So that was very interesting to see. I think longer works, especially longer works that rely solely on reflection, having this passionate quality about them is very rare, and Byron does it very well. And one stylistic point, one metrical point is that the final line is an Alexandrine. So it's in the pentameter, the rest of the lines, and the final line is in the Alexandrine. This kind of this unique stanza. So the final line has this luxury, because it has 12 syllables, of incorporating both reflection and passion. So somberness and this flowering force. So this final line, I would ask you to keep an eye out for how Byron deals with this final line in the stanza. Now, I thought of doing something different with my third recommendation, because I didn't read enough fiction this year to really recommend even three very potent books. But I did go back and see the books I had read, and and one book was The Maker by Borgess. Now I've read a lot of Borgess, and so I thought, okay, which one is The Maker in his collection? Was it the one before The Book of Sand, or was it the one after Shakespeare's Memory? So as I went back and read the book in my Kindle, I saw the titles of each stories, and I realized I don't remember any of it. So so I clicked on the first story, and then as I'm reading the story, I know that I've read this story before, but I still can't remember what happens. But I can recognize that I've seen this form before, I've seen this meaning hit at my face before, but I can't recognize the story. And I say this because I think Borges would have found this highly amusing and even complimentary to his work, to say that I know that I've read it, but I just don't remember any of it. He would have asked me to blissfully forget his works. Now I've saved the best for last, and this is Nabokov's Laura. I have very mixed feelings about this book, actually. I felt guilty as I bought it, because I thought Dmitri, Nabokov's son, had made a mistake in recognizing his father's will, and that Nabokov would not have approved of this publication. But for better or for worse, the editor has the last word, as Kinbote would say. And something explodes in my heart as I talk about this book, because I can see Nabokov's handwriting, and I can see the transcription here. And I sort of go back to read it, to tap at the artistic fount that I've enjoyed for so long. And I don't have much to say except to read some of it. I think I just do it justice if I read the most sensual part of it. That first surrender of hers was a little sudden, if not downright unnerving. A pause for some light caresses, concealed embarrassment, feigned amusement, prefatory contemplation. She was an extravagantly slender girl. Her ribs showed. The conspicuous knobs of her hip bones framed a hollowed abdomen, so flat as to belie the notion of belly. Her exquisite bone structure immediately slipped into a novel, became in fact the secret structure of that novel, besides supporting a number of poems. The cup-sized breasts of that 24-year-old impatient beauty seemed a dozen years younger than she, with those pale squinty nipples and firm form. Her painted eyelids were closed. A tear of no particular meaning gemmed the hard top of her cheek. Nobody could tell what went on in that little head. Waves of desire rippled there, A recent lover fell back in a swoon. Hygienic doubts were raised and dismissed. Contempt for everyone but herself advertised with a flush of warmth its constant presence. Here it is, cried what's her name, squatting quickly. So that last part is related to an early part, which is not the point here. The point is the description of Laura, which fills me with warmth. I hope it does you too. And that's it. I'll make a separate video about the non-fiction which I read more of this year, so I hope that video will be better.